I didn't do anything! Why are you doing this to me?
The officer's knee pressed into his spine, grinding his face into the grimy asphalt of the rest stop. "Stop resisting," he hissed, even though David wasn't moving a muscle. The sharp scent of gasoline and old urine filled his nostrils, a cocktail of public neglect he could taste on his tongue. He was a man in a tailored suit, now ruined, driving a modest but clean sedan on his way to see his sick daughter. But all they saw was a black man at a rest stop after dark, and that was enough. As a second officer wrenched his arms back, something small and heavy fell from his jacket pocket. A small, leather-bound book. The first officer, Officer Miller, glanced down and kicked it under the car with a smirk. Dropping the evidence? David watched the book, a copy of Meditations his daughter had given him, disappear into the darkness. In that moment, something inside him didn't break. It went cold. It went still. This was the pattern break. The world expected him to panic, to yell, to plead. He did none of it. He focused on the rhythm of his own breathing, a quiet rebellion they couldn't touch. He felt the cold steel of the cuffs bite into his wrists. They were too tight, intentionally. "What's the hurry?" the younger officer, Evans, asked, his voice nervous but trying for bravado. "My daughter," David said, his voice steady, betraying none of the firestorm in his chest. "She's at St. Jude's. I have to get to her." Miller laughed, a short, ugly bark. "A sick daughter. Heard that one 1,000,000 times, pal. Tell you what, you can call her from the station." But David knew that was a lie. You ever been blamed for just existing? For just being in a place at a certain time, wearing the wrong skin? This isn't just a story about one man. It's a story for anyone who's ever been made to feel small for no reason at all. At the station, the humiliation escalated. The fluorescent lights hummed with a sterile indifference. They emptied his pockets onto the counter, his wallet, his keys, a pen. Then Miller produced a small baggie of white powder from his own pocket and dropped it onto the pile with a theatrical flair. "Well, well, well, looks like we got more than a traffic violation." David's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. This was a frame-up, a felony. His career, his reputation, his ability to provide for his family, all of it was being torched right before his eyes. "That's not mine," David said, his voice low and dangerous. "They all say that," Miller sneered, turning to Evans. "Book him. Possession with intent." Evans hesitated, just for a second. His eyes met David's, and David saw a flicker of something. Doubt? Fear? Before it was gone, smothered by the need to belong, to be one of the guys. Evans turned away and started typing. That small moment of cowardice felt worse than the overt racism. It was the betrayal of a man who knew better, but chose to do wrong anyway. They took his phone, denied his one call, threw him in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair. The metal bench was colder than ice. He sat not in rage, but in a profound, hollowing sorrow. He had dedicated his life to the law. He had studied it, honored it, and for the last decade upheld it from a position of power and respect. He believed in the system, and here he was being devoured by its ugliest gears. Have you ever put your faith in something only to have it break your heart? If you know what that feels like, that feeling of being completely and utterly let down, let me know in the comments, because that's a pain that cuts deeper than any physical blow. He sat on that bench all night. The minutes stretched into hours. He didn't sleep. He thought of his daughter, Maya, in her hospital bed, waiting for him. He pictured her face, the way her eyes lit up when he read to her from that little book of Stoic philosophy. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. The words echoed in the silent concrete box. Around 3 a.m., a different guard came on duty, an older man with tired eyes and a gentle demeanor. He walked past David's cell, stopped, and came back. He didn't look at David with contempt, but with a quiet curiosity. "You okay in there?" the guard asked, his voice a low rumble. "I'm fine," David lied. The guard nodded, unconvinced. "They got you down for possession. Miller's caller. That guy, he sees ghosts where there ain't any." He came closer and slid a cup of water through the slot. "What's your name, if you don't mind my asking?" "David. David Mercer." The guard froze. His eyes widened and he took a half step back, not in fear, but in shock. The name hung in the air between them. The guard squinted, looking at David not as a criminal, but as a man, really looking. "Mercer," he whispered. "Judge Mercer? Liberty County Courthouse?" David just nodded, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. The guard stared, his mind visibly racing, connecting the dots. I was in your courtroom last year. A speeding ticket. My wife was sick. I was rushing." He shook his head in disbelief. "You listened. You didn't just throw the book at me. You waived the fine. You just told me to be safe. You said, everyone has a story we can't see." This was it, the wait what moment. Not that David was a judge, that was the story's hook. The real twist was this: a small act of grace he had shown a stranger a year ago was now returning to him in his darkest hour, the one person who saw him. The guard, a man named George, looked up and down the empty hallway. He swallowed hard. "This is wrong. This is all wrong." He walked swiftly to a desk at the end of the hall, picked up a phone, and turned his back, his voice a hushed, urgent whisper. "Some of us know what it's like to be loyal and to be left behind anyway. But some of us also know that one person, that one act of kindness, can be the light that gets you through the darkness. If you believe in the power of a single person to make a difference, hit that like button." The next morning, everything changed. The cell door swung open not with a clang, but with a quiet click. A different officer, one with sergeant stripes on his sleeve, stood there. He didn't look at David, he looked at the floor. "Mr. Mercer, you're being released. Your personal effects are at the front desk. There's been, a mistake." David walked out of the cell, his suit rumpled, his face etched with the exhaustion of the night. He collected his wallet, his keys, his pen, and his phone. And there, sitting on top of it all, was his little leather-bound book. Someone had retrieved it. George. He walked out the station doors into the blinding morning sun. He didn't go home. He didn't go to the hospital. He went to the courthouse. He showered in the private bathroom in his chambers, the hot water washing away the grime, but not the memory. He put on not a suit, but his long black judicial robe. It felt heavier today. It felt like armor. At 10 a.m., he walked into his courtroom. The room fell silent. He climbed the steps to the bench, the seat of judgment, the very symbol of the system that had tried to chew him up and spit him out just hours before. He sat, and the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise, the Honorable Judge David Mercer presiding." He looked out over the room, and there they were, standing before the defendant's table, Officers Miller and Evans. Their faces were pale, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. They had been summoned for a disciplinary hearing, expecting to see some internal affairs lieutenant. Not him. Never him. Miller's jaw was slack. Evans looked like he was going to be physically sick. They were looking at a ghost. The man whose face they had ground into the asphalt was now sitting 10 feet above them, cloaked in the full authority of the state. He let the silence hang in the air. He let them stew in it. He saw the panic in Miller's eyes, the desperate search for an escape route where there was none. He saw the shame finally bloom on Evans' face. He picked up his gavel, its wooden weight familiar in his hand. Then he set it down. He didn't need it. He leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "Officers Miller and Evans, we seem to have met before." Miller flinched as if struck. "Though under different circumstances," David continued, his eyes locked on Miller. "Last night, I was your suspect. Today, I am your judge. Funny how the world turns, isn't it?" He paused. "Last night, you accused me of possession of a Schedule II substance with intent to distribute. a charge that carries a mandatory minimum of 5 years in state prison, a charge you knew to be false. He shifted his gaze to Evans. You stood by and watched it happen. You co-signed the lie. You became a part of it. He saw them exchange a desperate glance. Their careers were over, pensions gone, jail time was a real possibility. He held their entire lives in the palm of his hand. He could crush them. The part of him that sat in that cold cell all might screamed for it. Revenge, an eye for an eye. But then he looked down at his bench, and next to his case files, he had placed the small leather-bound book. He could almost hear his daughter's voice reading the words. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. He took a deep breath.
You disrespected your badge. You disrespected the oath you took. But more than that, you disrespected every citizen you swore to protect. You became the very thing you are supposed to fight. You looked at Miller, whose tough guy facade had completely crumbled, revealing a scared, pathetic man. You asked me last night what the hurry was. I told you my daughter was sick. You laughed. David's voice cracked, just for a second, with the raw emotion of that memory. My daughter, Maya, has leukemia. She is 9 years old. She had a rough night last night. She was asking for her dad, and I wasn't there, because of you. A tear traced a path down Evan's cheek. Miller just stared, broken. I have the power to end your careers, David said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing them to lean in. I have the power to send you to prison, to make you feel a fraction of the helplessness and fear you made me feel. And every fiber of my being that feels wronged wants me to do just that. He let that sink in. But what would that accomplish? It would reinforce the idea that power is for punishment, that justice is just a fancier word for revenge. I do not believe that. I cannot believe that. If I do, then everything I have ever worked for is a lie. He stood up, his height and the robe giving him an almost biblical authority. Officer Miller, you are fired, effective immediately. You will surrender your badge and weapon before you leave this courthouse. You will also face charges for perjury and falsifying a police report. Then he turned to the younger man. Officer Evans, your sin was one of cowardice, and in our profession, cowardice is more dangerous than malice. You had a chance to be a good man, and you chose to be a silent accomplice. You are suspended for 1 year without pay. During that time, you will complete 1,000 hours of community service, unpaid, in the very communities you have been policing. You will learn their names, you will hear their stories, and you will see them as human beings. You will also attend mandatory racial sensitivity counseling with me. He picked up the gavel. And both of you, he said, his voice ringing with finality, will write a letter of apology to my 9-year-old daughter. You will explain to her why her father could not be with her when she was scared. This court is adjourned. He struck the gavel. The sound cracked through the silent room like a thunderclap. It was over. He walked back to his chambers, the weight on his shoulders a little lighter. He took off the robe, the armor, and was just a man again, a father. He grabbed his keys and the little book and walked out of the courthouse, not looking back. He drove to the hospital, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He walked into Maya's room, and her tired face lit up. "Daddy!" He rushed to her bedside, hugged her fragile body, and breathed in her scent. he was home. "I'm sorry I'm late, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "It's okay," she said, pulling back to look at him. "Did you have a bad day?" He looked at her, this incredible, resilient child, and he smiled. The first genuine smile in 24 hours. He thought of the officers, of the cell, of the courtroom. He thought of the choice he had made. "No, baby," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. It was a hard day, but it wasn't a bad day. It was a day for justice. He chose grace over revenge. He chose to build rather than break. What would you have done? If this story moved you, subscribe, because we need more stories not about revenge, but about the hard, painful, and beautiful work of true redemption.